are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And
keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Thursday, February 13th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So I apologize yesterday. There were so many connection issues during my show, so I really didn't get to put out the content that I wanted to yesterday. So basically everything that I wanted to talk about yesterday will be discussed today. So we will talk about Jalen Hurts and where would we rank him after he captures his first Super Bowl championship amongst the top quarterbacks in the NFL. We'll get into that conversation. We'll talk about if the Eagles' performance in the Super Bowl, their defense's performance in the Super Bowl, where does that rank amongst the best performances in the Super Bowl ever by a defense? We'll talk about what teams were the most disappointing in 2024 in the NFL. We'll also talk about the Giants and how this was arguably their worst season in franchise history, not just on the field, but off the field as well. And then in the final part of the show, I will do my final power rankings for this season, my top 5. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Jalen Hurts. And where would we rank him after this Super Bowl performance? And I got to tell you, it is really hard because it's how you rank your quarterbacks. Everybody's going to be different with how they rank their quarterbacks. Because you could talk about the talent, the accolades, you could combine them. I was having a conversation with my friend yesterday, and he brought up, what quarterbacks would you draft? If you're a GM, what quarterbacks would you draft? If there was a complete reset in the NFL and everybody was available, what quarterbacks would you take in order? There's so many different ways to rank quarterbacks. For me, I guess it's like a combination of everything, a little bit of everything. Because I do think with this Super Bowl championship here that Jalen Hurts just won, you definitely have to put him in the top 5. Definitely a top 5 quarterback. However, for me, I would only put him at 5. Because I still think that Joe Burrow is a better quarterback. I still think Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes is obviously going to stay at 1. Even after that disastrous performance on Sunday, he's still going to be at number 1. But that's kind of where I'm at. However, you could put Jalen Hurts ahead of a Joe Burrow because Joe Burrow doesn't have any accolades, doesn't have any MVPs, doesn't have any All-Pros, doesn't have any Super Bowls. Jalen Hurts has played well in the 2 Super Bowl games that he's appeared in against the Chiefs. He's outplayed Patrick Mahomes on the biggest stage. And now, after Sunday, he's got a Super Bowl ring to his resume. So I would put him over, well, I would be okay with people putting him over Joe Burrow. I could see why people would put him over Joe Burrow. I could also see why people would put him over Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson because now he has that Super Bowl. But for me, I can't put him over Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. I can't. Because those guys have MVPs. They have All-Pros. Josh Allen was second-team All-Pro this year. Lamar was first-team All-Pro. I can't do it. However, Jalen Hurts, like I said, he has played well in the biggest games. And he wins games. you take a look back a couple of years ago to when he got hurt towards the end of the regular season, the year they went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Chiefs. Gardner Minshew played a couple games, and they lost those games. The Cowboys game was competitive. That was back and forth. But, both games were competitive. But, again, they lost the Cowboys game. They lose to the Saints at home. The Saints didn't make the playoffs that year. The Saints were not good. If Jalen Hurts plays in that game, they win. They win that game. So we could sit here and say, oh, Jalen Hurts has a stacked team, which he does. But they need Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is an important part of this team. If Kenny Pickett's playing in the Super Bowl on Sunday, I think things go differently. The defense was out of this world. But I don't think with Kenny Pickett playing that we would have saw the game that we saw on Sunday. Jalen Hurts played really well in the Super Bowl. And I talked about this. That early interception didn't faze him. He was locked in that entire game. And he did it not just with his legs, but with his arm. He was the leading rusher once again for the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And, some of the throws to A.J. Brown, the back shoulder, even the one that got called back, the offensive PI early on. You could tell that Jalen Hurts was locked in. And then, of course, there was the dagger to Devontae Smith, which, the game was over before that. That made it 34-0. I thought it was over when it was, pretty much thought it was over when it was 17-0. But he was locked in. And a lot of people, they evaluate quarterbacks on their stats. I get it. Jalen Hurts might not win football games in the prettiest ways, but he wins games. He also doesn't turn the football over. Also, having that conversation with my friend last night, same friend, talked about the other things, the other qualities, the leadership. Because he's one of those quiet leaders. And before the Super Bowl, you had Peter Schrager talking about Jalen Hurts making this great speech before the game. This was one of their best team meetings of the season. And look at what happened. Look at what happened. It showed on the field. This team was motivated. He was motivated to get this thing right this time, knock off the Chiefs, and be Super Bowl champions. So, like I said, Jalen Hurts is a top 5 QB. But to me, I'm still putting him at 5. And I know some people are going to complain at that. I get it. I'm still going to put him there. Now, if the Eagles go and repeat next year, it's going to be hard not to put him up even more. But even then, he's the first QB in this new era that we have here that's won a Super Bowl. In the Mahomes era, he is the first QB in this era to win besides Mahomes. Because I'm not counting Brady and I'm not counting Stafford because they're in the last era. He's the first one to break through. And once again, you could say, well, look at the team that he has. I get it, but he played well in the Super Bowl. He contributed. You could say he did go along for the ride, but Peyton Manning went along for the ride in Super Bowl 50. Jalen Hurts played a solid game. He turned those Patrick Mahomes interceptions into 2 touchdowns. Well, actually, no, shouldn't say that. Cooper DeJean was a pick 6. The other interception was turned into a touchdown. So, that's kind of where I'm at with the Jalen Hurts debate. And, we'll have more conversations about the Eagles tomorrow because I do want to get into talking about could they become the next dynasty, because I know that's a conversation that's being had this week. And I know it's premature, I guess, but, you look at this Eagles team. They're going to have most of these players next year. Who's to say they can't do it again? But we'll have that conversation tomorrow. But Jalen Hurts is a guy that has dealt with a lot of criticism. A lot of people have doubted him. I've critiqued him at times. I don't think I was as harsh as some of these people on social media and some of these personalities you see on TV. But I took the stance of, listen, there's going to be a time where this passing game is really going to have to step up. And Jalen Hurts played really well in the playoffs. Played his best games in the championship game and in the Super Bowl. In the championship game, the running game was great, the defense was great, the passing game was great. Saquon Barkley really didn't do anything in the Super Bowl. And Jalen Hurts in the passing game stepped up. But a lot of people are, of course, going to point to how the defense just had a performance for the ages, which I agree with. But they didn't go along for the ride. They contributed. But let me know what you guys think, though. Where would you rank Jalen Hurts? Would you put him ahead of everyone that isn't Mahomes? I know there's some people that would put him ahead of Mahomes just because he's outplayed him in 2 Super Bowls. And, recency bias. Mahomes is coming off of his worst performance ever in a game. But it's really tough to rank quarterbacks. It is, because you could go about it so many different ways. But for me, I think you got to put Jalen Hurts at least in the top 5. But there's still... I'm still going to put Burrow ahead of him. I'm still going to put Lamar and Josh Allen, and especially Mahomes too. But he's a Super Bowl champion, and 3 of the 4 guys that I just mentioned have not done that yet. One of them has played in the Super Bowl, but he didn't win it. So, but let me know what you guys think about where you would rank Hurts. Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our first break of the show now. And then when we come back, we are going to talk about the Eagles' defense and their performance in the Super Bowl. Where does that rank amongst some of the best performances in the Super Bowl, defensive-wise? So we're going to get into that conversation when we come back from our first break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are going to talk about the Eagles' defensive performance in the Super Bowl and where does that rank amongst the greatest performances in the Super Bowl when it comes to defenses. So let's get into that conversation now. So I went back, I included, the 85 Bears and the 2000 Ravens, because how could you not? And I don't think this defensive performance was better than the 85 Bears, just because, I mean, looking at what the 85 Bears did, and I watched the highlights of that game, and what was interesting is the Bears got the ball to start the game, and Walter Payton fumbled on that drive, and the Patriots got the ball in plus territory, and they didn't do anything with the ball. They did not move the ball at all, but thankfully they were in field goal range. Although, short term, yeah, that was great. You go up 3-0 in the Super Bowl, but long term, yeah, the game, got turned upside down after that. But so I included first half total yards as well as the total yards for the game for all the Super Bowls that I included here. And then I had the turnovers and the sacks that were in the game as well. So Super Bowl 20, this was the Bears against the Patriots. So the Eagles, they held the Chiefs to 23 total yards in the first half. And that was the best among the first half total yard comparison until I got to the 85 Bears. They held the Patriots to negative 19 yards in the first half. Negative 19. And then the Patriots finished the game with only 123 total yards. The Bears had 6 takeaways in this game, 7 sacks. One of the takeaways was a pick six. There were 4 fumbles and a safety. Now, I'm not old school when it comes to that Patriots team. So I didn't really go into specifics of how good that Patriots team was that year. But that team was not going for a three-peat. So, comparing that Patriots team to this Chiefs team, I don't really know. But, anyways, so, yeah, I think the 85 Bears probably had the best performance in the Super Bowl. Then you look at the 2000 Ravens. This is Super Bowl 35 now. So they held the Giants to 136 yards in the first half. And then for the total, 152. So they kind of had the reverse of what the Eagles had, where they held the Giants to 16 total yards in the second half. 5 turnovers in the game. There was a pick six. Kerry Collins was picked off 4 times. There were 3 sacks. There was a fumble. And they're regarded as one of the greatest defenses of all time, along with the 85 Bears. So you got that performance as well. Then Super Bowl 42, Giants against the Patriots. This is one of the greatest offenses of all time. They held Tom Brady to 87 yards in the first half. And there was only 1 turnover. There was 1 fumble in the game. But they got to Brady 5 times, and the total yards for the game, Patriots offense had 274. Super Bowl 48, Broncos and Seahawks. They held the Broncos to 94 yards in the first half, the Legion of Boom did. Broncos ended up finishing with 306. But there were 4 turnovers in the game. There was a late fumble. There was the fumble that led to the safety on the first play of the game. You had a pick six. Peyton's arm got hit. Malcolm Smith picked it off, returned it for a touchdown. And then before that, you also had Cam Chancellor picking off Peyton early in the game as well. But they only got to Peyton 1 time. See, I did watch the highlights for that game too. And Peyton did have time to throw in certain points in the game. It's not like what we saw on Sunday where Mahomes had no time to do anything. He was scrambling for his life. At least Mahomes could run around. Peyton couldn't run around. Peyton was a statue. But Peyton did have time to throw. And the Broncos did get the ball to the other side of the field, but once they got there, they had to go for it on 4th down, and they wouldn't get it. And the Broncos defense didn't do them any favors because they were awful in that game. So then we go to when Peyton did win the Super Bowl, and that was because of the defense. Super Bowl 50. They held the Panthers to 161 yards. This was Peyton. This was Cam Newton's MVP season. They had 315 total yards. 315 total yards. There were 4 turnovers in the game. They got to Cam Newton 7 times. Sacked him 7 times. There was a pick, and there were 3 fumbles. Von Miller was responsible for 2 of them early on in the game that led to a touchdown. Malik Jackson recovered the fumble in the end zone. And then there was the one later in the game where a lot of people criticized Cam Newton for not jumping on the ball, and he beats himself up over that too. But I feel like that was probably the greatest individual performance in a Super Bowl. Because Von Miller was a one-man wrecking crew. I mean, look, the Broncos defense, they carried that team to the Super Bowl. But I feel like, for me, I just remember Von Miller taking over that game. But, I mean, listen, they got to Cam Newton a bunch of times, and they intercepted him, too. And that game was close at one point. You know, it was 10-7. You thought maybe the Panthers were gaining momentum, but they just never did. Broncos defense clamped up. Then you got Super Bowl 55, Tampa Bay against Kansas City. They held Kansas City to 121 yards in the first half. Kansas City finished with 350. And I actually think they had more yards than Tampa. But it was like 350 to 340. And they had 3 sacks in the game of Mahomes and 2 interceptions. And then what happened on Sunday? 23 total yards in the first half, 275 yards in total, although a lot of that really came in garbage time, especially the Worthy touchdown where the Eagles went for it on 4th down, and then the Chiefs got the ball at midfield because they didn't pick up the first down, and first play Mahomes throws a bomb to Worthy for a touchdown. And 3 turnovers in the game. One of them was a pick six. You had the fumble. Mahomes' arm got hit, lost the ball. The Zach Bond interception as well. And they got to Mahomes 6 times. So, like I said, I think the 85 Bears probably could give it to them as the greatest defensive performance in the Super Bowl. But now, what is the greatest Super Bowl performance in my lifetime since I started watching football? And it's really hard to dethrone the Legion of Boom because what they were going up against, Peyton Manning had this record-breaking season, 55 touchdown passes. The Broncos were just an unreal offense that year. And they held them to 8 points. You know, the Broncos, just like the Chiefs the other night, they didn't score their first touchdown until late in the game. But the difference is, the Chiefs did not get the ball past midfield until pretty much the 4th quarter. They had 1 first down until late in the second half. Or actually, no, early on in the second half they had a first down. But still, they only had 1 first down in the first half. But they didn't get the ball past midfield until late in the second half. And it's really hard to say which was better all time because the Chiefs are coming in looking to three-peat. Patrick Mahomes is looked at as one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play this game, and he is the best quarterback right now in our time. And they did that to him. But then you look at what the Legion of Boom did. Peyton Manning, record-breaking season, 55 touchdown passes, number 1 scoring offense, and they held them to 8 points. Now, all time, I still would put the Legion of Boom over this defense. I still would, because then they went to another Super Bowl after that. Now, they did lose. And, you know, the longevity. They were together for a while. Now, this defense is going to be together for a while. Now, there's some players that could be departing. But, for the most part, everybody's still going to be there. But it's just, that's where I'm having trouble. It's very close. I think I would lean towards saying this was the better defensive performance because of just the fact that you held Patrick Mahomes in this offense down to 23 yards in the first half, and they didn't move the ball, and they didn't get the ball past midfield until the second half. And they were getting after him. They were getting turnovers. Like I said, the Broncos, they were able to somewhat protect Peyton Manning at times in the Super Bowl. And they were able to move the ball to the plus side of the field. It's just, like I said, once they got over there, they did nothing with it. So it's just, that's kind of where I'm at. Which was more impressive. But then you could also say, well, this Chiefs team, you know, a lot of people looked at them as being somewhat fraudulent because they were winning all these one-score games. The Broncos were constantly blowing people out. One of the teams they blew out that season was the Eagles. Just throwing that in there. It has really no relationship to this Eagles team, but still. Actually, I think there was some Eagles player. I think Lane Johnson was on the team back then. I think. And Brandon Graham. Andy Reid was on that team. Oh, wait, no. No, he wasn't. Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was. Caught myself there. But yeah, the Broncos were blowing people out. They were one of the greatest offenses of all time. And the Seahawks held them to 8 points. So, yeah, that's where I'm kind of stumped on who I would favor. But you could take a look at the offenses this year, just for this year. The Chiefs' offense was not that good. Won a lot of close games. The Broncos, all-time offense. But it's just because of what the Chiefs were going for. The three-peat with this quarterback, with this head coach. That's why it's kind of tough. And then you could also bring up, the Giants Super Bowl when they beat the Patriots, because the Patriots are going for a perfect season. They were blowing people out constantly. And the Giants held them to 14 points. But that was kind of around the time where, I wasn't really that big into football. The only recollection I really have from that Super Bowl, the only thing I could recall, is when the Patriots went up 14-10 and I started crying and I went into the bathroom, crying about, the Giants are going to lose. That's the only thing I remember. So I do remember the Broncos Super Bowl, Broncos Seahawks, and obviously, I just saw this one. They're definitely neck and neck for who had the best performance. And then I'd probably put the Broncos-Panthers game after that. And then probably Tampa against the Chiefs. Because, again, like I said, the Giants, this is of my lifetime, watching football. But probably would put the Giants, Patriots, that would be in there. That would probably be second or third. It's tough. But that's kind of where I'm at. Let me know what you guys think, though. Where would you rank the Eagles' performance? I think for me, I'd maybe give it the slight edge over the Legion of Boom. I do think that the Legion of Boom was the better all-time defense, of course. But in terms of just performance in the Super Bowl, I think I'm going with the Eagles. Call me crazy. But let me know what you guys think. Where would you rank the Eagles' defensive performance in the Super Bowl? Let me know in the comments. So before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about what teams were the most disappointing in 2024. So make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to talk about the most disappointing teams of the NFL season. And a handful of comments that we got. We got from Teddy Belcher 4K Ultra Wide 21.9. He had a lot to say in the chat. Also, Anthony Manzano in the chat. Usually it pops up on my chat menu here, but for some reason I wasn't getting them. But a lot to say about the Hurts debate and also comments on the defense. So So Teddy talked about Brock Purdy. He's above Brock Purdy, next to Stafford. He said Joe Burrow. I call him throw Burrow, and Bengals can't run 3 yards. Burrow's biggest game this year is the Cardinals. That's the extra 17th game. I think you got the years mixed up because they played the Cardinals last year. But yeah, I had a lot to say. But Anthony in the chat about what we just talked about with the defenses. I think the 2 defenses the Giants had when they beat the Patriots is better than the defense in terms of performance in the Super Bowl. That's fair. That's fair. He also said, I like Jalen, but I don't think he's top 5, maybe top 10, but top 5 is reserved for the elite. Listen, Jalen Hurts won the Super Bowl, though. And, we talk about a lot of these guys that are elite. Other than Mahomes, nobody else has a Super Bowl ring. So, I don't know. It's really tough to do rankings. It just is. It just is. But let's get into the most disappointing teams of the 2024-2025 season. So we just talked about the Bengals a little bit when I was reading the comments there. The Bengals you got to put in that conversation because they were a team that, in many people's eyes, including myself, they had playoff aspirations. I thought with Joe Burrow being healthy this entire season, I thought that he was going to come in and have a big year, which he did. And I thought the Bengals were going to find themselves back in the playoffs. But they finished with the same record they did last year, 9-8. And I give them credit. They were 4-8, right? And it just looked like this was going to be they were going to finish with like a top 10 pick. And, they put together a strong stretch of games. And they made things interesting at the end, but it was too little too late. But their defense, you want to talk about the main reason why they didn't make the playoffs, it's their defense. And Joe Burrow received criticism because the margin of error was so thin. If he made one mistake, that could impact the game and decide whether you win or lose. And he had a handful of those moments this year just because he's putting up all these points, but the defense is doing the same thing. They're giving up points. So when he loses the ball and fumbles or throws an interception in a big moment, you got some people that come out and say, listen, Joe Burrow, you can't do that in that moment. You got to be perfect. He had to be perfect this year. And they ended up missing the playoffs. However, we talk about, I was referencing, the Ravens games and, the Chiefs game as well, although there was, that ticky-tacky pass interference at the end of the game, even though I think that was the right call. It's just Mahomes was throwing up a prayer on 4th down, and, they got a break there. But they lost to the Patriots 16-10 to start the year. The Patriots, they win that game, they're in the playoffs. So, it's just, that was probably their most disappointing loss of the year, was losing to the Patriots. Because if they win that game, they're in. Patriots got a higher draft pick. But you got to put them up there. I think another team in their division, the Cleveland Browns, they were disappointing. They basically had a reverse of what happened to them in 2023, where you had Deshaun Watson get hurt, you had all these injuries, and they still won 11 games and made the playoffs. You had Joe Flacco finish out the final quarter and a half of the season, and they made the playoffs. They did get bounced out in the first round by the Texans, but hey, they still made it, and you thought, all right, let's see what they do next year. And I thought Deshaun Watson, I didn't think he was going to be the Deshaun Watson from Houston, but I did expect him to be a little bit better. He was not good at all. And then he gets hurt. And then you got Jameis Winston starting, and, it was fun at times. I mean, I went to the game that he beat the Ravens. Now, there was a couple of passes that the Ravens dropped that should have been interceptions, but Jameis played a good game. The Browns won. It was great to be there in person, but it's just, Jameis threw a lot of picks. He threw a lot of picks. And then they put in DTR, and he really couldn't do anything. And it just, Nick Chubb was not himself when he came back. And who knows if he ever is going to ever be himself again. I hope he is, because I like Nick Chubb a lot. But they were a massive disappointment, too. Only 3 wins. And we'll see if they could bounce back from this. But now you got all the Myles Garrett stuff, him wanting to be traded. It's tough. It's tough right now. So I put the Browns in that category. The Cowboys. Cowboys were a big disappointment this year. I expected them to be a playoff team, at least a wild card team. I had the Eagles winning the division, obviously. But, they had a lot going on this offseason with Dak and CeeDee and getting their deals worked out. They finally did that. But the defense was not great. Played better towards the end of the year when they started to get healthier again. Dak gets hurt, though. They didn't really address the running back position. Rico Dowdle had some good games, but, he's not the answer. You got to get somebody else in there. Yeah, it was a very disappointing year, and now we'll see what Brian Schottenheimer brings to the table, as the new head coach for the Cowboys. I'm curious to see how that plays out. I mean, I think the Cowboys could be better, but I'm not saying that Schottenheimer's going to take this team to the promised land. So that's kind of where I'm at there. But yeah, Cowboys were a disappointment this year. 7-10. That is not what I expected going into the year. The 49ers. 49ers were a big disappointment. This team, has been in the NFC Championship game, the prior seasons, 3 straight seasons, and then they made it to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs and lost. But, maybe there was a Super Bowl hangover, but they just dealt with a lot of injuries and guys just underperformed. Christian McCaffrey was hurt all year basically, came back and then got hurt again. Brandon Ayuk, after everything that happened in the offseason, he was kind of disappointing, and then he got hurt, unfortunately. He tore his ACL. George Kittle was in and out of the lineup. He missed some time this year, but he did put together a good year. But, he missed some time. Deebo Samuel missed some time, and, he dealt with pneumonia, and even before that missed a game with an injury, and then, everything with him just not contributing, and drops were a problem for him this year. And now he's looking to get traded, and we'll see what ends up happening there. Brock Purdy got hurt this year. He missed a game. The defense, Nick Bosa was hurt. They were waiting on Dre Greenlaw to come back, and he wasn't 100%. Fred Warner was playing through an injury. Guys in the secondary were banged up. It was a mess. It was a mess. And it's a forgettable season for them. I think if this 49ers squad is healthy next year, they're going to be back to being how they've been. But yeah, no, it's what they finished 6-11. I mean, but you got to remember, this happened when they lost the Super Bowl against the Chiefs the first time. The COVID season dealt with a lot of injuries, and they ended up missing the playoffs. But yeah, they finished 6-11. They finished in last place in their division. I wouldn't have seen that coming. But we'll see how it goes. With the Niners, what they do this offseason. Also, I think it was made official that Aaron Rodgers and the Jets completely moved on, which I think was already leaning that way. It was already leaning that way. We talked about that, but I guess it was made officially official. We'll say that. But speaking of that, I think the number one disappointment was the Jets. With all the expectations coming in, Aaron Rodgers coming back, the defense, you got Garrett Wilson, you got Breece Hall. The Jets were expected to do a lot this year from a lot of people, including myself. I had them winning the division, and they won 5 games. Now, it was a collective effort. I don't think you could pinpoint it on one person. There are multiple individuals to blame. You could blame the quarterback. You could blame the coaching staff. You could blame the ownership. You could blame the defense. You could blame the kicker. You could blame everybody. You can't just blame it on one guy. And I know most people are going to blame Aaron Rodgers just because, he went to the Jets and he kind of took over the team, wanted his guys, and, people look at him as the reason why Robert Saleh got fired. But Woody Johnson pulled the plug on Robert Saleh prematurely. Now, at the time that the move was made, I wasn't, that against it because Robert Saleh was not a good head coach. But it's just what ended up happening. They went from being not well coached to just not being coached at all. with Jeff Ulbrich. And no offense to Jeff Ulbrich, but he was in over his head. But it was just massive disappointment for the Jets because you have all these weapons, you got this defense, but the defense took a step back this year. Let's be honest, the defense was not the same. They let go some guys on the defensive line, and there were some injuries. Jermaine Johnson tore his Achilles, I believe, and C.J. Mosley was hurt. It's just and Sauce Gardner took a step back, and you had people calling him by his real name. It was a lot. And, now the Jets, we'll see what they end up doing going forward with this new regime. Hopefully Aaron Glenn gets it right this time. And Darren Moogie, I think his name, the general manager. Hopefully they get it right. But, yeah, they were a massive disappointment. And I didn't mention the Bears. The Bears were also, I think, a disappointment. Because I thought with all this talent, and I thought Caleb Williams would gradually improve as the year went on, and he did. But, yeah, after that Hail Mary against the Commanders, they lose that game like that. Yeah, it was downhill from there. But, hey, they beat the Packers to end off the season. So maybe that's a step in the right direction. So, there's a couple of AFC South teams I didn't mention. Like, I thought the Jaguars could have bounced back from last year. They did not. They were bad. The Colts, a full year of Anthony Richardson, how was he going to do? He was not great. He tapped out of a game. Although I think after the benching, when he came back in, he played a little bit better. But still, it's kind of up in the air on if he's the guy or not. I know my friends have kind of given up on him, and they love Anthony Richardson. But, yeah, those are some other teams there. But I think the three biggest disappointments, the Cowboys, the 49ers, the Jets, that's how I would look at it. And then, of course, the other teams that I mentioned as well. The Bengals were a huge disappointment, missing out on the playoffs. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think. Who are the most disappointing teams of the 2024-2025 season? Let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments. So, we are going to take our next break. And then when we come back, we'll talk about the Giants. They were a disappointment, but, I didn't really have any expectation. I had them winning 7 games, but they won less than that. They were really bad. But we're going to talk about why this was probably their worst year in franchise history ever. So make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we are going to talk about the Giants and why this was probably their worst season ever. Now, I did want to bring up, so I mentioned this, so it is official. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets officially parting ways. We'll talk more about it tomorrow, but the Jets, they released a statement, or they put out a tweet on X, and basically they said, trying to hold back a sneeze. I was gonna do the breaking news thing, in case I had to sneeze. But anyways, I think we're good now. But basically, this is what the Jets put out. We have informed Aaron Rodgers that we will be moving in a different direction at quarterback. So we'll get into more of that tomorrow, and kind of just give an overview on Aaron Rodgers' time as a Jet and how that went. Just like the Giants here, disappointment. That's all I have to say. So, let's talk about the Giants. The Giants, now you got to remember, I talked about this yesterday when I was trying to work through the technical difficulties, so we're going to talk about it again. And, Yeah, the Giants, it was, this probably was their worst season ever because of everything, not just on the field, but off the field. The off the field stuff, the hard knocks. Hard knocks was the beginning because you got to see how the Giants handled their business behind closed doors. And the other thing, too, is I actually liked how the Giants handled some things. What their plan was to build the offensive line, to build the defensive line. They weren't going to overpay for a running back. You know, I was okay with that. You know, but looking back on it, yeah, I mean, they definitely disrespected Barkley. They didn't value him like they probably should have. And those clips on Hard Knocks are going to haunt this team forever. They're not going anywhere. They are not going anywhere. Especially with what just happened in the Super Bowl. So you had Hard Knocks. I also think another embarrassing moment, too, was the fact that they unretired a number to give to Malik Neighbors, who had never stepped on a field, on a football field yet, on a professional football field yet, on an NFL field, played in an NFL game. Sorry, I got to be really specific because, yeah, he's great in college. He's been playing football his whole life. But a guy that has never played a snap in the NFL, and you unretired someone's number, and you, Ray Flaherty, and you gave it to someone that he could be a bust. Now, Neighbors is not going to be a bust. So far, rookie season went great. With everything that happened, changes at quarterback, he was still able to put together a solid rookie season. But I thought that was a little embarrassing. Because you retired a number. You don't unretire a number. That's the whole point of retiring it. You retire it, and it's put away. But they didn't do that. And then, opening day, week 1, I was there. I was there for this. They got embarrassed by the Vikings. Embarrassed. In those uniforms that they wore. Those throwback uniforms that they wore. Because I wanted to see what they looked like in person. They got embarrassed. And not only that, you had them honoring all the old Giants at halftime. They had to witness that performance. So there's that. And then, you know, hey, they won on the road against the Browns, which at the time you thought, hey, that was a good win against the Browns. Browns ended up being just as bad as the Giants were. They won a game in Seattle, which I still don't know. How did they win that game? How did they win in Seattle? Makes no sense. So then I thought, all right, maybe they could do something here. Not make the playoffs, but just have somewhat of a respectable record. That did not happen. Everything went downhill after that. And then they benched Daniel Jones. They ended up releasing him. And Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock ended up finishing out the year. Giants ended up winning a game against the Colts that they had no business winning. And I think it's more of an indictment on the Colts. How the heck did you not show up for this game? You still had a chance to make the playoffs. Now, the offense showed up. The defense didn't. The defense let Drew Lock have his way. He put together one of the, a great performance. And everyone thought that ruined the Giants' draft positioning. That took them out of maybe taking a quarterback. But they still were able to get in the top 3. They got in the top 3. And, the Titans and the Browns, we'll see what they end up doing. But the Giants had an opportunity to have the number 1 overall pick, and they lost it by winning that game. Now, players are not going to tank. But that's what the fans really wanted. And obviously, they avoided Saquon Barkley breaking Eric Dickerson's rushing record against them the final week of the regular season because the Eagles rested their starters. But, earlier in the year when he went to MetLife and he had, 150 yards rushing, right? I think that's what he had. He destroyed them. And then Eli Manning is up for the Hall of Fame. He does not make it. Will not be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And then you had Saquon Barkley, his playoff performances against The Rams, he did have over 100 yards against the Packers, but, didn't really have any big runs in that game until the end, which, he ended up falling down because, he wanted the game to be over, which was the smart football play. But torched the Rams, torched the Commanders. Didn't do that much against the Chiefs, but who cares? He wins a Super Bowl. His first year leaving the Giants. And I'll throw in Xavier McKinney, the kind of season he had with the Packers, with all his interceptions. Giants let those guys go. One of them is a Super Bowl champion. And not only that, but this I don't understand. Michael Strahan was waving an Eagles flag. What? Why are you doing that? You're a Giant. You're not supposed to be doing that. Now, he was with Saquon, but, people are looking at it as, he could be trolling the Giants because he was upset. Yeah, I mean, he kind of threw a little bit of shot. He took a little bit of shots at the Giants over them letting go of Barkley and McKinney. And I don't blame him for that. But that's a bad look when you're an all-time Giant and you're waving an Eagles flag. So, yeah, and on top of that, they kept Brian Dable, they kept Joe Shane. Not good. Not good. And who knows when it's going to get better. Who knows? But it's just nothing went right for the Giants this year. I guess, Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy, their draft class was good. Brian Burns was good. Dexter Lawrence was good. But what did that amount to? 3 wins. 3. That's it. And now, big picture. Eagles, Super Bowl champions. Commanders, they were in the conference championship game. Cowboys, missed the playoffs, but they swept the Giants this year. You figure they're going to be back next year. Healthy Dak, healthy CeeDee Lamb, healthy defense. They hired Matt Eberflus to be their defensive coordinator, and I think he could coach a defense. You figure the running game's going to be better next year. Where does that leave the Giants? Last place. Now, you hear all these rumors, Matthew Stafford, could they get Matthew Stafford? I would love, if they got Matthew Stafford, I would be so happy. I'd be back in. But, at the same time, I'd be saying to myself, they're still not better than the other 3 teams in the division. They're not. So, yeah, we'll see what they do. Brian Dable and Joe Shane are going to be desperate. Their jobs are on the line. John Mara's had enough. He talked about running out of patience, even though the fans have been out of patience. The fans have been out of patience since, I don't know, since the Eli days. Since 2017. I mean, they made the playoffs in 2022, but, they beat the Vikings. Terrible defense. They played against the Eagles in Philly, and they got smacked. They have not won a game in Philadelphia since 2013. They have not won a game in Dallas since 2016. Dak's rookie season. When is it going to end? When is it going to end? I don't know. At some point it will end. But I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. But let me know what you guys think, though, about the Giants and the season that they had. What are your thoughts on their season? Let me know in the comments. So when we come back from our final break of the show, we will touch upon my power rankings. My last top 5 of the season, post Super Bowl rankings, and that will take us right to the end of the show. And this actually will be my second to last GSMC football podcast show. Now, before you freak out, I am not leaving. I am switching over to another show. Now, I made this announcement yesterday, but of course nobody saw it because we were having so many issues again. I will be switching over to the GSMC Sports Podcast show. That'll be starting on Monday. So not only will you get more football content, but you will also get to hear me talk about names like LeBron James, like Caitlin Clark, NASCAR. Not really NASCAR. But for those of you that remember, I used to do the baseball podcast. We will also be talking about baseball again. And what a time for it, because baseball is right around the corner. Pitchers and catchers have reported we will be talking about baseball. But yeah, we're going to talk about everything. Not just football, not just baseball. We're talking about everything. And you guys are going to help me out too, because there might be some things that, I might not have caught, might not be familiar with. So that is what's on the way. Really looking forward to this opportunity. So that is what will be happening on Monday. So tomorrow will be the last traditional GSMC football show, podcast show for me. So I just wanted to bring that up. So yeah, we're going to take our final break. I know I wanted to save that for the end, but I wanted to say it now. But we'll talk about my power rankings when we come back. So stick around for one final time today, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to get into my power rankings, my final NFL power rankings of the season. So let's get right into that. So at the number 5 spot, I have the Baltimore Ravens. Sorry, I'm taking a little bit to get up here. The Baltimore Ravens I have at 5. They came up short in the divisional round against the Bills. Lamar Jackson did not play a good first half, and that kind of put them behind. Those 2 turnovers. Well, one of them really didn't lead to anything. The second one did, the fumble, which I still don't know how Lamar dropped that, but played much better in the second half. The Ravens had an opportunity to tie the game, and 2-point conversion. That's what everybody's going to talk about. And even before that, Mark Andrews fumbled the ball on a previous drive. So you had Lamar with the 2 turnovers in the first half, and then Mark Andrews, the 2 turnovers in the second half, and the Ravens came up short and they lost to the Bills. And Josh Allen didn't have, this out of this world performance that game. They had a chance. The Ravens had a chance, but they didn't. I would have liked to have seen them run the ball a little bit more with Derrick Henry in that game, but they didn't. But they're at number 5. And next year, look, I still look at them as, one of the top teams in the NFL. I think they're going to continue to make some improvements, maybe add another pass catcher. I maybe like to see that. The defense was not very good. The pass defense was not very good. Should be more specific. The pass defense was not very good at the start of the year, but they really turned things around there, and, they were very good at stopping the run. But, they were always good at doing that. They came up short. And, when are they going to break through? When is Lamar Jackson going to break through? And they're going to give Derrick Henry, I think, another extension or a extension. because he signed a 2-year deal, so they could tack on maybe another year. And yeah, the way Derrick Henry was playing, he could go for a while, but like I was having a conversation with my friend last night, he said at some point the wheels are going to fall off. And yeah, it's true. And hopefully it's not next year, because Derrick Henry had a great year. And if it wasn't for Saquon, I mean, he probably would have been, Derrick Henry would have been the best free agent best running back acquisition from this offseason. So at number 4, I got the Washington Commanders. And what a season that they had. What a season Jane Daniels had. One of the best rookie seasons maybe ever. Bringing his team all the way to a conference championship game his first year. I mean, I didn't expect this. I really didn't. I mean, I didn't have the Commanders winning a ton of games this year. Didn't think they were going to be a very good team. But they proved me wrong. And now, we talked about the NFC East. The Giants are going to have to deal with this team for a while, and Jane Daniels. So, yeah. And actually, also, I forgot to mention in the last segment, the games that they won, the Giants, with Tommy DeVito, that impacted their draft positioning. They could have got Jane Daniels. They could have had him. But ended up not getting him. But Malik Neighbors is a good player. It's just, could have had him. Could have had Jane Daniels and Saquon Barkley. But did not. But yeah, no, they were surprised this year. And, I give a lot of credit to Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury. I wasn't a fan of the Dan Quinn hire just because of how things ended in Atlanta. And then, of course, the performance that the Cowboys defense put on against the Packers. I wasn't a fan, but you know what? I don't remember. Dan Quinn was also on the coaching staff of the Legion of Boom. And, yeah, he did get Atlanta to a Super Bowl. So, and the Cowboys defense, if you take away that performance, that defense was solid with him. So, I kind of just, it was recency bias, really. But, yeah, the Commanders really turned it around, and, they put together a great season. They went on the road, and, they beat the Buccaneers, and then they went on the road and they beat the Lions. They forced Jared Goff into, 3 interceptions. It was, and they didn't punt until the fourth quarter. They really put together a great season, and they really have nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, I know they got blown out by the Eagles, but I don't really blame Jane Daniels for that. You had I think De'Ami Brown fumbled. I almost said Jahan Dotson, but he's on the Eagles now. De'Ami Brown fumbled. Eckler fumbled. Jane Daniels did what he could do. I mean, he threw a pick, towards the end, but he was trying to, get something going there. But yeah. No, I mean, props to the Commanders and the season that they had. I put them at 4. And then at 3, got the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen, a great season for him. And, he ends up winning the MVP. Bills came up a little bit short there against the Chiefs in the championship game. But, Josh Allen once again played a good game against Patrick Mahomes. It's just, once again, he was on the losing end. And you wonder, when is that going to change? I say the same thing about the Ravens. When is that going to change? At some point, I do think one of these guys is going to break through and get the best of Patrick Mahomes. Or maybe Patrick Mahomes doesn't even get to an AFC Championship game. There's going to be a year where that happens. But we're still waiting on that. The Bills, they definitely need to, reload at certain positions. I do think they need another pass catcher as well to their team. Because Josh Allen was doing it with, Keon Coleman, who was a rookie, Mac Hollins, and Khalil Shakir, who's a nice player. They traded for Amari Cooper, but he was really a non-factor. So the Bills got some work to do. They got some work to do. And I think there's some early indications that they're not going to be big spenders. But I do think I would like to see them add more to the offense. And I think the defense also. Because, they got some older players on that side of the ball. So we'll see what they do. But I got them at number 3. And then at number 2, I got the Kansas City Chiefs. They made it to their 3rd straight Super Bowl. Did not go how they wanted it to at all. Nothing went right. But this team won 15 games this year. And I know people are going to look at these games, and a lot of them were one score, and I get it. But I still got to put them at number 2. They made it to the Super Bowl again. They're that second dynasty now in this century. Although it did take a hit with them losing to the Eagles, and Patrick Mahomes' legacy, I think, took a hit, in terms of the GOAT conversation. And Andy Reid, I think, also took a bigger hit, too, when it comes to him being regarded as one of the greatest head coaches of all time. I mean, I think he still is, but he's gotten blown out in 2 Super Bowls. It's not good. It's not good. But this team had another good year. Next year, they're going to have to reload on the offensive line. I keep saying it for these teams. Maybe another weapon. Maybe. Because we also got to see what happens with Travis Kelce. Could he retire? I think he's going to keep playing. He said, that's the thing. When you come off of a loss like that, of course you're going to be so deflated that you're like, yeah, I don't know if I want to keep playing. I think he's going to keep playing. However, we were talking about this in our production meeting. I think he's owed $19 million next year. Yeah, he's going to have to take a pay cut. He is going to have to take a massive pay cut. And I think he'd be willing to do that. I think he'd be open to doing that. That's just me, though. But they still got a very good team, and they could very well find themselves, back in the championship game next year. So, yeah, but they're at number 2. And then at number 1, I got the Eagles. Got off to a bit of a slow start. They were 2-2, and, after that win against the Browns, people were chanting for Nick Sirianni to be fired. Well, what are you going to say now? They're Super Bowl champions. A lot of that had to do with Saquon Barkley, the defense. Jalen Hurts played well this season. Didn't put up spectacular stats, but, was still solid. Only turned the ball over once in the playoffs, and that was in the Super Bowl, and that didn't faze him, like we talked about. But got to put the Super Bowl champs at 1. They had a bounce-back year after the late-season collapse. That is a distant memory now. That is in the past. They're going to have to look for a new offensive coordinator now with Kellen Moore taking the Saints job, but you're still going to have Vic Fangio in that defense. You're still going to have Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, that offensive line, Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. I mean, this team, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, maybe they could become the next dynasty. Maybe. So I got them at number 1, though. They deserved it. I really would have liked to have seen how the matchup would have gone if they would have played a healthy Lions squad. How would that have gone? I think they would have beat the Lions. I think even if the Lions are healthy, I think they would have still beat them. But we'll never know. Maybe, because Amon-Ra St. Brown mentioned this, maybe he gets his wish and they play the Lions to start the year. That'd be pretty cool. See those squads both healthy, first game of the year. We'll see. Or maybe they open it up. Maybe they open up against the Giants. To just continue to, just continue to pile on with the Giants. So, yeah, so to kind of run through it again, final power rankings: 5 Ravens, 4 Commanders, 3 Bills, 2 Chiefs, and then 1, I have the Eagles. Let me know what you guys think about these rankings. What would your rankings be? I didn't include the Lions. Could have included them. Didn't include the Rams. But that's how my top 5 is. This is just after post Super Bowl, post playoffs. This is not going into next year. Next year, my power rankings going into next year are going to be different. And I'll definitely do power rankings for that when we get through free agency and the draft. So that is way down the line. But that'll be on the new show. But let me know what you guys think about the rankings. Like I said, what would your rankings be? So yeah, tomorrow will be the last show doing the football show, hosting the football show. I will be handing it off to, one of our sports writers, Matt, who does a great job. He will be taking the reins from me as I move on to the next show that I will be hosting, the sports show. So there's going to be some changes, but I'll still be around. But we will be talking more than just football. It's everything, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm excited for it, like I said. But that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. We had no issues today, thankfully, and hopefully that continues. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well, like I always say. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.